The story centers on Kakeru Kurosawa, a high school student with an unusual and secretive habit, using the girls' restroom at school to masturbate. He does this while fantasizing about his female classmates, with the thrill of potentially being discovered igniting new feelings within him. Before starting his routine, Kurosawa always ensures the school is completely empty. As a precaution, he invariably chooses the third-floor restrooms. Since there are no classrooms or sports clubs nearby, he considers it the least trafficked and, thus, the safest place for his acts. During one of his visits, Kakeru returns to the restroom and notices he left splatters on the previous occasion. He acts quickly, meticulously cleaning everything to erase any evidence of his presence or what he has been doing. Just as he exits the bathroom, he runs directly into a bespectacled female classmate. Kakeru panics, terrified he has been caught. However, upon observing the girl, he perceives her to be quite scatterbrained and as much of a social outcast as he is, which immediately calms him down. He nervously attempts to invent an alibi, claiming a teacher had sent him for something. The girl, without paying much attention, simply turns around and walks away. Kakeru deems her strange, but decides the encounter poses no danger and heads home. The next day is the last day of school before summer vacation begins. A classmate invites everyone to go to karaoke after school. Several students join in, but Kurosawa scoffs at the invitation and plans, instead, to head to the girls' restroom once more. At that moment, Nagatsuka Keiji, the leader of the class's otaku group, approaches to invite him as well. Nagatsuka is very kind, but Kakeru judges him internally. Thinking of the derogatory nickname the class has given him, he decides he would never associate with the otaku group, rejecting Nagatsuka's invitation by claiming he feels unwell. Nagatsuka, with good intentions, says he will invite him again sometime, to which Kakeru replies that there will be no chance, as the school year is ending. As soon as class is over, Kakeru quickly heads to his destination. On the way, he crosses paths with the cleaning lady and makes a mental note that he must be more careful. He arrives at the restroom, considering this to be the last time he will perform his act in his second school year. While doing so, he fantasizes about another female classmate. When he finishes, he feels a chill and decides to leave before the lie about his supposed illness becomes a reality. However, he hears someone approaching and quickly locks himself inside a stall. It's a group of 3 girls who soon notice his presence. They speak to him, but Kakeru, for obvious reasons, remains silent, overcome by panic. The girls eventually give up and start talking among themselves. Kakeru recognizes them. They are the students who habitually skip classes and smoke in the second-floor bathrooms. He deduces they probably moved up to the 3rd floor because the cleaning lady was in her usual spot. Though Kakeru mentally criticizes them for using the bathroom to smoke, he reflects on the irony of his own presence there. The girls leave, and Kakeru cautiously emerges. Before he can escape, he overhears them warn the unknown person in the stall not to try to use them because of what he heard. Kakeru manages to flee, but he cannot stop thinking about the risks he has run, first with the scatterbrained girl, and now with the trio. He questions whether he should abandon his habit, but contrary to quitting, the sensation of having been on the verge of discovery actually excites him. This adrenaline rush leads him to conclude that his life is about to become much more entertaining. However, his time for fun was about to run out. The new semester begins, and Kakeru meets up with his classmates to check their new room assignments. To his dismay, he is once again assigned to the same class as Nagatsuka Keiji, whom they internally refer to as Mr. Cauliflower. Nagatsuka is genuinely happy to share a class with him again. Kakeru's mind, however, is preoccupied with evaluating the quality of his new female classmates. He quickly identifies the 3 girls he considers the most notable. Nato Kyoko. He classifies her as number 1, considering her the most popular and attractive female student in the school. Takegawa Magister. He ranks her as number 2, noting that although she isn't as beautiful as Nato, she still lands in the school's top 10. Nishimoto Erika. Number 3, whom he perceives as the most immature of the trio, but still acceptable. Kakeru gets excited and thinks he will now fully enjoy his student life, but his fantasy is interrupted when he realizes he has been murmuring his thoughts aloud. Nagatsuka nearly overhears him, causing Kakeru to immediately stop. They both head to the new classroom, but upon arrival, Kakeru is startled to hear the voices of two of the girls who nearly discovered him in the restrooms the day before. Once seated, Kakeru is desperate to perform his routine as soon as classes end. He confesses to himself that he didn't have his daily relief during the holidays and feels an accumulated urge. He even randomly selects a new classmate, Kitahara, as the object of his next fantasy. At that moment, the person who will be sitting next to him for the semester takes her seat. It is the first girl who almost discovered him in the bathroom. Her full name is Kitahara Aya. They exchange glances and an awkward greeting. Since most of the students are new to each other, the teacher asks them to introduce themselves. The first to stand out is a bald boy named Ichikawa, who declares that his dream is to become a singer. It's Kakeru's turn next. He introduces himself as 14-year-old Kurosawa Kakeru. He mentions his hobbies are reading and listening to music, omitting his habit in the girls' restroom, though he thinks about it. Finally, it's Aya's turn. Kakeru watches her and thinks she is extremely timid. However, Aya stands up in front of everyone and shouts that she is Choi Hong Man, a reference no one understands. Everyone is astonished. Aya concludes her presentation by declaring she will become a workaholic and begins shadowboxing. Of course, the whole class bursts into laughter, especially the other two girls who were close to discovering Kakeru. It is revealed that Aya did not do this voluntarily. She has been a victim of bullying by these two classmates, who forced her to make a fool of herself. The chapter ends with Kakeru observing Kitahara Aya, the girl he had chosen as his new object of desire, being humiliated in front of everyone. Several months have passed since the start of the new school year, and Kakeru observes that the friendship groups in the classroom are already well defined. While observing, he witnesses the same classmates who previously harassed Aya now ruining her lunch. Kakeru remains distant, believing the incident doesn't concern him, as he has no special relationship with her. They have only exchanged a few words, and he has merely used her as an object of fantasy in his private acts. Instead of worrying about Aya's situation, Kakeru decides to focus his attention on Nato Kyoko, whom he chooses as his next victim for his fantasies. Once classes end, Kakeru immediately heads to the restrooms and recreates a fantasy scene involving Kyoko. Upon finishing, he feels euphoric. In a moment of high spirits, he even bows before leaving. As he exits the school, he hears a noise and discovers that Aya has just fallen out of a tree. Kakeru asks her if she is okay. She quickly answers yes, adopting a distant attitude. Aya is about to leave, and Kakeru notices she is holding her gym clothes. He stops her and asks if she is being bullied by the girls in their class, assuming they threw her clothes into the tree. With a very cold tone, Aya tells him it's none of his business and thanks him for his concern. She bids him farewell and runs off. The chapter concludes with Kakeru reflecting and admitting that Aya is right. What happens to her is not his problem. The students are in their physical education class, where some play, others slack off, and still others watch the girls. After class, upon returning to the classroom, the boy Ichikawa notices that the window is broken. The students quickly wonder if someone has broken in to steal and check their belongings. Apparently, the only missing item is the uniform of an overweight classmate nicknamed Pizza Boy. Despite a collective effort to find the uniform, they are unsuccessful, forcing the boy to attend the following classes in his gym clothes. At the end of the school day, Aya approaches him and hands him his uniform, explaining that she found it inside her backpack. She apologizes, says she doesn't know why it was there, and retreats in embarrassment. But at that moment, the girls who bully her stop her and pressure her to confess to having stolen the uniform herself. Under intense pressure, poor Aya is forced to admit that she did steal it. While the class murmurs, it is revealed that the bullies were actually the ones who committed the theft to mess with Aya. Not content with this, they ask her if she is perhaps in love with the boy. Everyone in the class tries to contain their laughter as the aggressors insist, forcing Aya to confess her love in front of everyone. Cornered, The entire class joins in the pressure, and Aya has no choice but to do it. Following the confession, the class bursts into mockery. Little Aya begins to cry, which only provokes more laughter, as her classmates say they must be tears of happiness. For the first time, Kakeru is irritated and upset, not only by the bully's cruelty, but because now the whole class has joined the harassment. He clenches his fist tightly and, though he doesn't know why, decides he will make sure the girls get what they deserve. Kakeru continues with his fantasies and rituals in the restroom. This time, he uses Shugawa, one of the girls who bullies Aya, as the object of his imagination. He fantasizes about her extensively. Upon completing his routine, he reveals that he has already put his revenge plan into action. He arrives at his classroom and senses an atmosphere of unrest. The mood is exactly as he had planned. Nagatsuka, Mr. Cauliflower, approaches him and informs him there has been another theft in the classroom. This time, the victims are the classmates who harass Aya. The theft consisted, once again, of the removal of their gym uniforms. The girls are very angry and are interrogating everyone to find the culprit. Kakeru feels triumphant, thinking everything is going according to his plan. The bullies approach Kakeru and Nagatsuka to ask if they know anything. They suspect Kakeru, as he was the only student absent from that particular class. However, Nagatsuka covers for him, saying Kakeru's absence was due to illness. Kakeru denies any involvement, and the girls are left with no choice but to give up. At that moment, some students from another class enter and announce they found some uniforms in the girls' restroom. They drop them off and rush away to wash their hands. At this point, it is revealed that Kakeru had used the girls' uniforms for his fantasies before leaving them there. Finally, the narration details how Kakeru planned his revenge. First, he notified the teacher and Nagatsuka that he would be late due to an illness or hospital visit. Then, he entered the school at 7 a.m. He waited for the classroom to be empty and stole the uniforms. He entered the restroom, performed his act, and left the uniforms there. Kakeru feels the girls deserve what happened for the humiliation they inflicted upon Aya. The teacher enters and asks them to sit down, but notices the tense atmosphere and asks if something has happened. Shugawa, visibly distraught, throws down her uniform and storms out in a rage. The confused teacher asks the other students, but no one says anything, and class begins. For a brief instant, Kakeru and Aya exchange glances. Kakeru dismisses it as a coincidence and wonders if Aya feels satisfied seeing how pathetic the two bullies looked. We are informed that the gym uniform incident had no major repercussions. The bullying classmates, Shugawa and her friend, only missed one day of class, a behavior that was habitual for them, so no one suspected the true reason. The next day, they showed up as usual and continued their routine of bothering Aya, though with a slightly more moderate intensity. One Monday before the recess, the teacher notifies them about the upcoming 3-day class trip and asks them to form groups of 5. Many students express their dissatisfaction with this task. Kakeru, our protagonist, maintains his solitary and disinterested stance, thinking the trip is foolish and that, since it is so short, the people he shares a group with really don't matter. Meanwhile, the group of otaku students finds themselves in a dilemma, discussing which of them must be left out of the group of 5. Nagatsuka Keiji, whom Kakeru mentally calls Mr. Cauliflower, takes the initiative and decides to sacrifice himself, leaving his group to form an alliance with Kakeru. Kakeru is internally pleased with this solution. Thus, the trip group is formally composed of Kakeru, Nagatsuka, the Cauliflower, Aya, and Pizza Boy, the overweight classmate whose uniform had been stolen previously. Kakeru, feeling stressed by the trip preparations, decides his restroom routine is necessary to calm his mind. He heads to the bathrooms, mentally selects his new fantasy, and begins his act. He achieves a new distance record during his climax. He cleans up meticulously, and just as he is about to leave, he hears slight footsteps approaching. Based on his experience, Kakeru tries to remain calm, knowing that panic would only make his discovery easier. The person taps on the door of his stall. Kakeru remains silent, thinking it is the best option. However, the girl outside calls out to him, "Are you in there, Kakeru-kun?" Kakeru immediately turns pale. He wonders how it is possible that she discovered him, considering all the extreme precautions he always takes. The girl calls him again. Kakeru recognizes the voice. It is Aya. He deduces that if he remains silent, he will simply confirm his identity. He is forced to make a decision. At that moment, Aya adds that she has an important favor to ask him. The chapter concludes with Kakeru reflecting that it was the first time he had heard Aya speak to him with such confidence and determination in her tone of voice. The scene resumes at the moment Aya asks Kakeru for a favor in the restroom. Kakeru, aware that there's no point in feigning innocence anymore, thinks of ways to escape the situation. Aya breaks the silence and reveals the favor. She needs Kakeru to make Neide Kyuko suffer the same fate as the other classmates who had bothered her. For Kakeru, the request is shocking. Neide Kyuko, it should be remembered, is the girl classified as the top one in beauty in their class. Kakeru cannot believe what she is asking. Aya explains that she knows he was the one who stole the uniforms, arguing that his excuse about going to the hospital was false, and that he was the only absent student who could have done it. Kakeru attempts to justify himself, asking Aya how she knew he was in the restrooms at that moment and suggesting her claims are based only on assumptions. He plans to deny everything if she doesn't have convincing proof. Aya admits that the evidence of the theft alone is not enough to blame him, but she reveals that her true understanding began the day they first met. She always knew Kakeru went daily to the third-floor restrooms and locked himself inside. She reminds him that on the day of their first encounter, he lied, saying a teacher had sent him to organize cleaning supplies. Kakeru wonders how Aya could know this. The answer is simple. Aya was the person the teacher had actually entrusted with organizing those supplies, since the cleaning lady was on vacation. Kakeru realizes the complexity of his situation. Aya continues explaining that, from that day on, she began to suspect him. Although she initially didn't give it much thought, when Kakeru left school the day his uniform ended up in the tree, she decided to follow him. That is how she confirmed that, after classes ended, he headed to the third-floor restrooms daily. Aya declares that she is not interested in knowing exactly what Kakeru does in those restrooms, though she assumes it is nothing decent. Kakeru finally understands the deductive process, but there is something he fails to grasp: the motivation behind her request to take revenge on Neide. Aya adopts a serious attitude and reveals her true intention. She wants to be the recipient of the girls' restroom. Kakeru is bewildered. Aya, without mincing words, confesses that she is directly extorting him. Either he does everything she asks, or she will reveal his secret to the entire school. She doesn't know if a single act of revenge will be enough, but Kakeru is cornered. Knowing he has no choice, Kakeru asks for at least an explanation of why she seeks revenge on Neide, as Neide never directly bothered her. Aya responds that while Neide was not a physical aggressor, she saw her actively enjoying and encouraging the humiliation when the other girls were harassing her. Kakeru recalls that, in fact, Neide was one of those who most encouraged the situation when they forced Aya to confess her love for the overweight classmate. Aya confesses that she cannot forgive her, because to her, Neide is just as guilty as her bullies. Therefore, she asks him to help her carry out revenge on her behalf. Kakeru expresses his disbelief at the contrast between the Aya he thought he knew and the determined person standing before him. Aya tells him she will return tomorrow at the same time and expects him to give her an answer. She apologizes for interrupting his happy moment and leaves. The chapter ends with a pensive Kakeru, unable to predict the course his life will take from now on. The next day at school, Kakeru is engrossed in the recent events. Confused, he wonders how the situation escalated in this way. He feels betrayed, as the act of stealing the uniforms was initially an attempt to help Aya, and now she has cornered him. Furthermore, Kakeru reflects on the request to take revenge on Neide. Although he acknowledges that Neide has occasionally joined the other classmates in bothering Aya, Kakeru doesn't consider her to be as evil as Aya describes, and he thinks it is not sufficient reason to execute an act of revenge against her. He cannot shake the feeling that Aya's demand is morally wrong. Although Kakeru and Aya cross paths several times during the day, they do not exchange any words since their conversation the day before. When classes end, A resigned Kakeru tells himself that he has no other choice. As usual, he first heads to the library to wait for the other students to leave. Upon arrival, he realizes the place is unusually crowded because it has begun to rain, and many students have sought refuge there to wait for the rain to stop. Kakeru cannot concentrate on his reading due to the ambient noise. Just when he thinks his day cannot get any worse, a girl speaks to him to ask what he is reading. It is Takegawa, the student classified as the class's top 2. She asks him if the seat next to him is free and takes a seat beside him. Kakeru is surprised that a girl like Takegawa has addressed him and sat next to him. He stares at her until she asks if something is wrong. Kakeru, nervously, assures her it's nothing, thinking that this is the first time they have ever conversed, despite him having frequently used her as the object of his fantasies. Kakeru asks Takegawa what she is reading. She tells him the title. Kakeru gets excited, realizing he has already read it, and is about to accidentally reveal a spoiler, but Takegawa stops him immediately. He apologizes, but the girl kindly replies that it is no problem. After a brief silence, Kakeru questions why Takegawa approached him to talk, considering there were many other classmates available. He deduces that her approach must have been a simple coincidence, since his only connection to her is his personal fantasies. Takegawa breaks the silence by asking him if he reads often. Kakeru answers affirmatively, and she comments that she supposed so, as she has seen him reading alone during recess. After another long silence, Kakeru, feeling somewhat awkward, wonders how he should continue the conversation, as he doesn't want to interrupt her reading. At that moment, the rain stops. All the classmates, including Takegawa, begin to leave. Before leaving, Takegawa kindly says goodbye to Kakeru and tells him she will see him later. Kakeru is left alone and looks at the clock, realizing that it is now time to head to the restroom. However, as he gets up, he wonders how long it has been since he felt so good without the need to perform his private act. He questions whether this feeling is due to overcoming stress, the interruption of the rain, or if it is a result of having had a conversation with Takegawa. As he heads to the restroom, he thinks that, without knowing why, he seems to have accepted his fate. Aya arrives shortly after. She asks him if he has made a decision. Kakeru replies that he never had to make one, as he never really had another option. The chapter ends with Aya thanking him for accepting so quickly and saying she will now explain her plan. The next day at school, the teacher is visibly angry in the classroom. He informs the students that until the culprit behind the recent incident comes forward, no one will be allowed to go home. Apparently, Nate Shiko did decide to complain to the administration about the theft of her uniform. The teacher attempts to pressure them, warning that if they do not confess immediately, the consequences will be more severe. It is clear that Kakeru has no intention of turning himself in, and he thinks this incident has escalated far more than he had planned. The narration flashes back 3 hours to detail what occurred. Kakeru had repeated the action of the previous thefts, carrying out his private act with Nate's uniform. The only difference from the previous cases is that Nate chose to file a formal complaint with the teacher. Returning to the present, the boy named Ichikawa, the bald one, tells the teacher that his method is useless, as it's impossible for the culprit to confess, and that it could even be a student from another class. He asks the teacher to let them go, claiming he has scheduled club activities. The teacher yells at him to be quiet, while Kakeru thinks he only wants everything to end so he can go read at the library. Finally, the teacher proposes an alternative. He hands a sheet of paper to each student and asks them to write their opinion on the incident, clarifying that they do not need to include their names, as it will be anonymous. Kakeru writes that he has no idea why the culprit acted that way. The scene changes, and we find Kakeru and Aya talking in the restrooms. Aya appears concerned and tells Kakeru that, had the teacher discovered them, she wouldn't have known what to do, so she thanks him. Kakeru, seizing the moment, asks her if he is free now. Aya responds affirmatively, thanks him again, and assures him she will not go to the bathroom to bother him anymore. However, before leaving, Aya adds a condition. If for any reason she wishes to take revenge on someone else, she will seek him out again. Kakeru accepts the condition, understanding that, Regardless, he no longer has any way to refuse. They both say goodbye. The next day it is raining. Kakeru meets Takegawa again in the library. She asks him to recommend a good book, and Kakeru suggests an easy-to-read science fiction novel. They spend a considerable time discussing their reading hobbies. Kakeru realizes that, unlike the previous time, they are talking much more, and he feels a pleasant and comfortable sensation doing so. During their conversation, Takegawa asks Kakeru if he has ever considered writing a novel, thinking he would be capable of doing so. Takegawa confesses that, although she has read many books, she has never found one that manages to shake her heart. She asks him to promise her that if he ever manages to create such a moving work, he will let her read it. They both say goodbye. Kakeru checks the clock and realizes it has gotten very late, so he won't be able to perform his restroom routine. He confesses that, in reality, he doesn't feel the need to do it. He decides to go home but stops for a moment before leaving the school. He reflects that since the school trip starts tomorrow, he will have to suspend his private routine. Although the idea doesn't please him, it is necessary. The chapter concludes with Kakeru thinking about Takegawa as he murmurs under his breath that, in truth, he would love it if it rained again tomorrow. The day of the school trip has arrived. Nagatsuka Keiji, visibly excited, tries to take group photographs. Kakeru, however, covers his face, refusing to be captured in the images. Thus begins the first day of the adventure. Kakeru can't help but reflect on the peculiar nature of their group, especially the dynamics and relationships among its members. Nagatsuka proposes naming the group SOS, which stands for Savor Our School Trip. The excursion's first destination is Nara. The group tours the site, takes some commemorative photos, rests for lunch, and continues with the sightseeing. Along the way, they run into the classmates who usually harass Aya. Kakeru internally wonders how they can look so smiling and calm after everything they have done. Later in the tour, they bump into Takegawa. She greets Kakeru and asks if he is enjoying himself. Nagatsuka, seeing her alone, asks her why she isn't with her own group, to which Takegawa replies that she would like to join them for a while, as she finds the SOS group quite unique. During the time Takegawa joins them, she and Kakeru converse at length about their shared affinity for reading. Kakeru observes how Takegawa is very sociable and interacts easily with all the group members, leading him to think that this capacity for connection is the fundamental reason for her popularity. Upon finding a small attraction, an opening that participants must crawl through, Nagatsuka decides to try it and get stuck. Takegawa expresses her desire to try it as well. Kakeru, in a fleeting thought, is tempted to mentally save that image for his private fantasies, but he manages to restrain himself. They finally arrive at the lodging place. They have dinner, clean up, and go to bed, thus concluding the first day. The second day begins, and the group heads to an aquarium. They spend a considerable amount of time exploring the place. Kakeru can't help but think how bored he is by everything. Although Nagatsuka maintains his constant enthusiasm and his classmates Aya and Pizza Boy are interacting a bit more, Kakeru feels he cannot comfortably adapt to the group's dynamic. He thinks about the necessity of having to postpone his daily routine due to the trip. However, for a reason he can't explain, he admits that perhaps feeling this boredom is not entirely bad. Just as the atmosphere around Kakeru was starting to improve slightly, Aya grabs him by the arm. She tells him she has something important to discuss with him and asks him to ride the Ferris wheel together so they can talk in private, abruptly interrupting Kakeru's mood.